Hello, everyone. Mr. Lipchick here, and today's discussion is going to be about the role of ethics in Homeland Security and the importance of it, of ethical conduct, and how a lack of ethical conduct can and will create more problems than a disastrous situation has already brought forth. Okay, a little bit about ethics. A good way to illustrate ethics is through the issue of war. Uh, Soldiers and officers are trained extensively on ethics. Ethics is a field of philosophy dealing with moral questions of right and wrong. In war, questions often arise as to whether or not an action is ethical or unethical. And knowing the difference can determine success or failure. On March 6, 1968, a unit of the U.S. Army entered the village of My Lai with instructions to kill any Viet Cong guerrillas that they encountered. They shot nearly everyone in the village, to include old men, women, and infants. They were ordered to shoot by their platoon leader, Lieutenant William Calley, and their company commander, Captain Ernest Medina. Over 300 Vietnamese civilians were executed, and the shootings continued until Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, a helicopter pilot, observed the killings and landed his helicopter in the village. He ordered his door gunner to aim his machine gun at Lieutenant Calley and ordered him to shoot the lieutenant if he refused to stop shooting. Thompson and his crew managed to save a small number of Vietnamese villagers and to fly them out of the area to an army hospital. Warrant Officer Thompson reported the massacre to his superiors. His reports were ignored as the Army wanted to protect itself from bad publicity. So he witnessed this terrible incident, and numerous officers all the way up and down the chain of command would not listen to him. Soon, Thompson found himself being sent on more and more dangerous missions and believed that this was a deliberate attempt to get rid of him. Eventually, the newspapers got a hold of the story and published it along with some very gruesome photos. Calley and Medina were court-martialed by the U.S. Army, and the Army's reputation was seriously damaged for many years, impacting recruitment and other important areas. The behavior of Calley and Medina had far-reaching consequences for our country. What might appear to be a localized incident was of such a magnitude and so shocking that it affected our entire society. Medina was banned from reenlisting. He was a career soldier, so that put an end to his career. And Calley was initially sentenced to life in prison, but he was pardoned by President Nixon. Basically, what was going on at My Lai was they were going outside of the norms of human behavior, the norms of Army behavior. Norms are general standards of behavior that are followed by most members of society. These standards give predictability to human behavior, and norms are often different depending on the situation. Now, granted, in My Lai, they may have been under a lot of stress, but that isn't a sufficient excuse to break the norm of not slaughtering innocent civilians. Violating situational norms usually have consequences from the members of a community or society. Helping and behavior norms include family and societal norms. As early as 2 years of age, children learn from the example of others that helping is good and selfishness is bad. Religious responsibilities promote altruistic behaviors that are often connected to religious beliefs and traditions. Give and take. Some believe that people help others in order to earn some type of future reward. Helping has an intrinsic reward. People feel good by the act of doing it itself. People feel empathy When people identify with the suffering of others and help without expectation of a reward. This is known as empathy. And there are cultural norms. People help to fulfill norms of the cultures that they belong to. 4 determinants of volunteer assistance include: 1. Do people recognize the need for help? 2. How attractive is the person in need? 3. How familiar is the setting? And 4. How many other people are around? There have been cases where people did not help a victim. In 1964, Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside her apartment building in Queens, New York, and many of her neighbors saw or heard the attack but did not call the police. Eventually, one of the neighbors called the police, but she died on the way to the hospital. Why do some people not help in an emergency? Fear. People are afraid to incur lawsuits or liability. Passing the buck, somebody else will take care of it. They rationalize. They may be unable to help, physically unable to perform the necessary tasks like CPR. Or they don't know what to do. Should we call the police or not? By learning what helps or inhibits assisting behaviors, people can manage their willingness to get involved and offer assistance. Emergency responders need to educate their communities regarding these factors. Sometimes looting occurs during a natural disaster. Looting is the taking of goods by theft. And looting is a rare occurrence in natural disasters, but it is often present in civil disorders. During natural disasters, members of society are more likely to come together to help during the disaster. During civil disorder, however, there is an underlying sense of anger in part of the population that creates conflict and violence between members of society. A good example might have been the Rodney King riots back in the 1990s. In 1992, 4 LA police officers were acquitted in the videotape beating of motorist Rodney King. And what followed were 4 days of rioting and violence. Millions of dollars of property damage occurred. And the riots were fueled by decades of racial tension and economic inequalities. Crowd management. Emergency managers need to dispel myths about crowd behavior. Crowds are not anonymous as previously thought. Crowds can be helpful and actually render assistance if asked. Community policing is more effective than a show of force. So, for instance, in Ferguson, Missouri, when they sent in those armored trucks, that was more upsetting to the community and created more resentment and more problems than if they had attempted community policing, building relationships with the people in the community. Emergent norm theory. While people generally maintain the same norms during natural disasters, sometimes unusual circumstances call for new ones. Food, water, and equipment, for instance, sometimes must be taken without payment in order to meet the emergency needs of the community. Responders must be aware of the possibility of these new norms in extreme circumstances. That concludes our discussion on ethics. Thank you for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you in the live lesson. Have a great day.